What's going on, Falcon fan? This your boy Ricondo coming back at you with another video. Today is April the 11th. The NFL draft is April 24th. So we're almost there, guys. Almost there. About 12, 13 days away from the NFL draft. And I would say this has been one of the most interesting off seasons, especially looking at the teams up top and their signings and things like that, which is very interesting to kind of shape the way this draft is going to be to go. Um, and I like it. I really like it. It's going to make a lot of intrigue in this draft. For Atlanta Falcons, maybe not so much. Will be interesting to see who will be on the board at number 15 for our Atlanta Falcons. But when you're looking at this draft, um, the top team is going to be really interesting, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds. I know you guys are pretty much thinking same thing about this draft. They said it's not a really high, lot of talented guys up top, but if you look at the middle of the draft, it's a lot of good prospects. The guys could be, starters in this NFL between 15 and 50. So I can't wait to see how this thing shakes out. And Atlanta Falcons, got 3 picks within the top 100, so they should be able to get some really good quality guys. So, guys, with that being said, if you have not already, go ahead and please subscribe to the channel. Please hit the notification bell so you know when I drop another video. Please hit the like button so I know you guys are here to talk about. Then please share my video thoughts YouTube universe so more people can come here and talk about. That's right, these Atlanta Falcons. So, guys, today we're going to talk about some roster moves that Atlanta Falcons have made. We're going to talk about Kirk Cousins. Yes, Kirk Cousins again. And is he actually going to be our backup quarterback, to start the season? And then the Falcons actually hosted 88 guys today on a pro day, local guys. So we're going to talk about some of those guys, and potentially the Atlanta Falcons could, be targeting, in the first round and later rounds as well. So, guys, let's get into the roster move update. The Atlanta Falcons bring back cornerback Kelvin King. If you guys not recall, he spent 4 years with the Green Bay Packers. A guy that he was highly Tyler Prescott. He was with our defensive back coach Jerry Gray, so he has some familiarity. That's probably why he's on the roster. But in 2023, Kevin King tore his Achilles. Right, he was actually out in 2022. In 2023, he tore his Achilles. So 2 seasons removed from that Achilles now. Highly drafted, guy coming out of college. Maybe he get back to form, right? He had some flashes. If you remember the preseason, he really flashed for the Atlanta Falcons. They played him at a little bit of safety and at cornerback for during the season. He did get one start, but not a lot of playing time. But this move only tells me that Atlanta Falcons just once again just adding depth to their roster, at certain positions. So when you do go into the draft and things like that, it's never really a need. It's not a reach. You're going to actually go get the best player available. I like this motto because you're filling the depth. Injuries always happen in NFL, so the more quality players you got, you know, in your on your depth chart on a roster is always good. So Kelvin King coming back, like I said, another year removed from that torn Achilles. He might could get back to form. He was drafted in the first round for the Green Bay Packers 7 years ago. He sat out 2 seasons. So what's going on, T. Terry? So he sat out 2 seasons. So we'll see. But this is a depth piece. I don't think he's in the right now competing for any starting positions or things like that. But the more depth you can bring to any position, cornerback / safety with Kevin King is going to be good, right? And good thing he wanted to come back. I think in 2022, he had to get away from football, for mental issues and things like that. And then come back in 2023, you tear your Achilles. He could have been out of football altogether, but love of the game brings him back. Get back with a coach that really respected his game, and Jerry Gray. So we'll have to see. But this is a depth piece for Atlanta Falcons. So um, right, not really much to really say about it. It's not like the Atlanta Falcons added something that's going to take us over the top. They just once again continue their depth. They also added offensive lineman Andrew Stubert. Um, so adding more depth to the offensive line, you always you're going to put bodies to the offensive line. The more bodies you can put in doing training camp and things like that, the more reps you can get for some of your players to see what they're all about. So that's why they actually create that 90-man roster, and the Atlanta Falcons just adding to that. And some of these guys can stick. You never know when you bring a guy in, and it's so cliche to say it, but guy get an opportunity and shine. You look at a guy like D. Alford, who welcomed back earlier, this week as well. Get an opportunity, and D. Alford took his opportunity. Undrafted free agent comes in, started for Atlanta Falcons. Now he's come back again and has a chance to compete with Clark Phillips III for that nickel position. So you gotta like what you see from just adding depth. That's one good thing we can say about this organization. They try to keep depth in every positions. Don't have the high end talent at all the positions, but when you look at the depth, people coming in, being able to not have such a drastic drop off is really good. So that's what I like about the depth. So welcome back, Kevin King. Let's see if you can actually, get back to some form where you were before those 2 year hiatus that you had due to injury and other things. All right, all right, all right, all right. Second topic is, um, which is, I know everybody's really, tired about talking about this topic, but we did get some news today that could really, affect, the decision for the Atlanta Falcons, and actually Kirk Cousins himself. And that's the Cleveland Browns, who a lot of people thought that, was probably going to make a trade for Kirk Cousins because of the, familiarity with Kevin Stefanski, the head coach for the Cleveland Browns. He coached with Coach Kirk Cousins, in Minnesota. So everybody trying to, put the pieces together and thinking that Kirk Cousins is going to get traded to the Cleveland Browns. But the day the Cleveland Browns made a shocking announcement that they signed 40-year-old Joe Flacco to a 1 year, $4 million deal. So, they brought in a veteran. It does not alleviate those guys from trading for Kirk Cousins. It still does not do that. And it also don't alleviate those guys who are drafting a quarterback as well in this year's draft. So, they got Kenny Pickett. We know they traded for him early in the season, during the off season. They bring in Joe Flacco. Maybe the word on the street they're going to probably take Travis Hunter at number 2, and then later on in the draft they try to take another quarterback and let Joe Flacco be kind of his bridge quarterback. He won't have to start right away. So that's the way it's looking like. But what does this mean for Kirk Cousins? And really, what it means is that Kirk Cousins, the opportunities for him to get his desire to be a starting quarterback in this league is really dwindling, right? Like I said, it's not out the window that the Cleveland Browns can still trade for Kirk Cousins, so that's not far fetched, right? Because they definitely can do that, but the closer and closer, and the more teams start to solidify their quarterback position, the less chance Kirk Cousins have opportunity to play for a team where he can actually start. Right? That's just the nature of the beast. There's only one other team out there that does not have a veteran quarterback right now, unless you're going to call Mason Rudolph a veteran, as that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right? They still waiting on Aaron Rodgers. Um, I know I came on here on Monday, said more than likely Kirk Cousins probably would, be closer to the draft, but you're starting to get more and more clarity on, those early picks in the draft that had, a need for quarterbacks, and it kind of starting to determine where this thing is going to go, right? It's reported that the Tennessee Titans are taking Cam Ward. Seems like the Cleveland Browns is going to take Travis Hunter, and then you get to a team like the New York Giants, who could take some people think the best player in that draft and Abdul Carter. But if you look at what the Giants have on their roster already with with Thibodeau and Brian Burns, do they really need a pass rusher Abdul Carter? So that's going to be interesting. And then they also got the big guy in the middle as well. So I guess it won't hurt to bring another guy in, but is he's going to be starting over Thibodeau or Burns? I guess they could put all three of them on the field at the same time, but it's going to be interesting to see. So the Giants could draft a quarterback still as well. I mean, just because they brought in Winston and Wilson does not mean, because both of those guys signed 1 year deals and up in age, so they could definitely be looked at as bridge quarterbacks for if the rookie were the quarterbacks come in, alleviate the rookie quarterback from playing right away. So that's where the Giants said. So in our essence, I think the draft does start at number 3 more than likely, and it's going to determine a lot how this thing is going to shape out. But for Kirk Cousins in general, it's really doomed, and that means Kirk Cousins might have to stay and be the Atlanta Falcons' backup quarterback. Um, a lot of people think that's going to be a toxic locker room. If you know anything about Kirk Cousins, and if you watch the whole NFL quarterback thing, especially documentary they did on Netflix. Was it last year, the year before last? And then he's going to actually participate it again this year. It kind of lets you know what kind of person he is. A guy who's guard for every man and upstanding guy. So I don't anticipate Kirk Cousins, making waves for Michael Penix in the locker room. Yes, Kirk Cousins want to be a starter in the NFL, but I do believe that he come in and he will help develop and game plan and everything for Michael Penix to get him, to help us win games. Later on down the year when injuries and things like that, because definitely could happen in the NFL. Um, Maybe we can open back up the trade talks and maybe send Kirk Cousins to another team. But as of right now, it looks like Kirk is here to stay. I still don't believe the Atlanta Falcons will release him. I don't think that'll be beneficial for those guys to do that. They still need a good, solid backup. And if you look around the league, um, it's not a lot of quarterbacks that's out there. So let me take a look right quick, because if we do come off Kirk Cousins, you want to know who you can actually bring in to replace him. So that's the interesting thing. That's your interesting thing. Here we go. Here's the list. So all those guys are off the table there. So we got Aaron Rodgers, we got Drew Lock, we got Carson Wentz, we got Easton Stick, we got CJ CJ Beathard, we got Teddy Bridgewater, Jeff Driscoll, Brett Rippon, Tyler Huntley, and Desmond Ritter. So, guys, you see what I mean by, if we move away from Kirk Cousins, the backup quarterback pool is not that vast. It's really not. It's just not, guys. It's not vast at all. Aaron Rodgers, of course, is the only really name that's really been successful in this league. Aside from Teddy Bridgewater, who had a couple of good seasons as well. But other than those two guys, Carson Wentz was, an early draft pick, earlier with the Philadelphia Eagles. But um, the Atlanta Falcons are going to have really, slim pickings to bring a backup quarterback in for Michael Penix Jr. So if Kirk Cousins is traded some way, some shape or form, the Atlanta Falcons are going to really be, really digging from the barrel to try to actually sign a quarterback. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see. That's why I believe that they would not release him, because of the backup quarterbacks, free agents that's available for them. Um, just to give you, once again, Drew Lock, Carson Wentz, Easton Stick, C.J. Bedford, Teddy Bridgewater, Jeff Driscoll, Brett Rippon, Tyler Huntley, and Desmond Ritter. That's your list, guys. That's your list of available quarterbacks in the free agent market, right? So the question I would ask everybody, I know you thinking that Kirk Cousins, you know, would be bad for a locker room. Would you rather have him or Disgruntled backup quarterback who can be able to help you win, you know, or are you going to go with some of these other guys and hoping and pray that Michael Penix stay healthy for the entire year? That's the way you got to look at it, right? Um, and if you look over the last couple of seasons, a lot of starters go down, and you got to have a solid backup in the back. So, hard as it may sound for a lot of Falcon fans to see, Kirk Cousins might be, the best bet to keep him on the roster and have him our backup quarterback, right? Especially looking at this quarterback free agent pool, right? So we just have to see. Now it is some words out there that the Las Vegas Raiders is really thinking about, letting Aiden O'Connell go, which kind of give you an idea what they might be looking for. Maybe they might draft a quarterback. I know they just signed their quarterback to a longer deal, but at the same time, he's up in age as well, Geno Smith. So they might be looking for a bridge there as well. So, you know, so you would add a guy like Aiden O'Connell to that for quarterback free agent pool as well. So just some guys, something to think about, guys, when we're talking about Kirk Cousins staying. The things that I believe that Kirk Cousins could actually, bring to the table is his experience, understanding, how to game plan. Um, and I really believe that he taught Michael Penix a lot, just sitting back watching, how to go through progressions. Kirk Cousins, whatever you want to say about him, he was able to, you know, progress really well, with his movements and stuff. You go back to that Tampa Bay game when we was in Tampa, he went through 5 progressions. He found Bijan on the weak side. So, you know, Michael Penix, I'm pretty sure he did learn a lot from Kirk Cousins, how to game plan and things like that. And I believe if Kirk Cousins is still here, um, I don't see any issues. I really don't. I really don't. Yes, it'll be looking at the dollar, looking at the checkbook and seeing how much he makes, being a backup. But other than that, I think the Atlanta Falcons at least need to let him stay here until maybe later on in the season. And then maybe you can find a trade partner. But as of right now, it looks like Kirk Cousins is here to stay. Cleveland have already brought in their older quarterback, and I believe that they're going to pick Travis Hunter at number 2, and later on in the draft, pick a younger quarterback to maybe be the bridge. What's interesting about Cleveland, before we get off the topic about that, is the fact that Deshaun Watson, if you've been looking out there on social media, and he's working real hard, and he's determined to prove everybody wrong that he's finished in this league. I do believe he's finished in Cleveland, but at the same time, you know, we'll see. Tear your Achilles twice. He will not play in 2025, but whatever he's doing to try to get himself back, we'll just have to find out if he still can be, you know, a, a shadow version of what we've seen from him, in Houston. So he has not shown really no glimpse of that the whole time he's been in Clemson. I mean, in Cleveland. So that's where it is. T. Terry says Kurt has an attitude towards the Falcons. Yeah, you're right. I agree with you on this. So it is some hard feelings there, but reality is where it is, man. It's a contract there. And you gotta be a professional about things. You know, that's where it boils down to. I think he just did as much as disservice to the Falcons than so many people saying the Falcons did disservice to him. Not being honest about an injury that you had and cost us to lose 6 of our last 8 games, man. It's just bad. So you know it's a sticky situation. I really understand that, but the Atlanta Falcons, would not be smart. It would not be smart for Atlanta Falcons to just go ahead and do away with his contract and let him walk and sign with somebody, and we still holding the bag. So I don't agree with that, not one bit. And then, like I said, if you look at the free agency pool for backup quarterbacks, it's not good. I started the show talking about depth, right? And that includes the quarterback position as well. You want to have depth with your quarterback position. It's not a lot of good, solid backup quarterbacks out there on the market right now. So, this could be a blessing in disguise for Atlanta Falcons to keep Kirk Cousins on the roster, at least until you get some kind of value back somewhere somehow. So that's what I believe about it. He says Watson just got married. Yep, different mindset. It's good for him, but you know, I don't know about his football career. That's what we need to determine. Once he comes back from his injury, which, in my opinion, will be back sometime in 2026. I do not think he will be back in 2025. Right. Um, that's one of those injuries, especially for a guy, like Deshaun Watson, who was, really mobile, athletic, being able to do some things. Not so much, like I said, just looked different in Cleveland as well. He just didn't look as explosive as he used to look. You know, messing with your mind, man, it really could tell a toll on people, especially athletes. Because once there's something get in your mind, um, it's really really like hard to get out, especially as an athlete, right? Some of the greats can block it out. You look at a guy like Ben Simmons, right? Um, he just once at that after that playoff game when he didn't take that shot, his coach came out blasting him. Teammates felt some type of way. He haven't been the same since, right? I mean, this guy was the number one draft pick in the league. You know, great defender. People was comparing him to being having the ability to over LeBron James because of his size and the way he can pass the ball. But after that one playoff game where you know he just shut down, it seemed like he's never got back to where he needed to be. So mentally, that's something just in the game. Just imagine something off the court. Guys, remember back in the day, when Kobe Bryant was going through his issues, out in Colorado, you saw how he compartmentalized. Think I said it right. You know, his things, the issues he had, and he went out on the court and he dominated. Right. You think about things like that. You think about a guy like David Duval. Yeah, I'm going to different sports, guys, because that's what I'm talking. So David Duval in golf, right? He got the yips in his golf game. His mentally could never, get back. He was a guy they was talking about was going to be up there with a guy with Tiger Woods, right? So, you know, in your head as an athlete could really be tough. And we know what Deshaun Watson went through, um, during his time. So I don't know if Deshaun Watson ever be back to where, you know, we say he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I don't see that happening, but it sounds like he's determined to be there. But in the meantime, Cleveland has brought in another older quarterback in Joe Flacco, and Kirk Cousins might be here to stay in Atlanta. I don't think he wants to be here. I don't think the Falcons want him to be here, but business is business, and I think that's where the the road meets, and it's all about contract. You know, um, no trade clause, all that stuff is tied into this, this complicated issue with the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins. But I wouldn't let him go. And honestly, looking at the free agency draft pool for quarterbacks, he's the best option that's pretty much left out there. He said, "How old is Watson? He may can be a backup one day. Yeah, he's still in his 20s if I'm not mistaken, man. So yeah, he's not old at all. I think Deshaun Watson is still in his 20s. So let's see here. Yes, he's only 29 years old. So he's only 29 years old. So yeah, I agree. He could definitely still, prolong his football career. Comes back, he'll be 30. He actually turned 30 this year. So, you know, he'll be 30 years old coming back into the season in 2026, and we'll see how that thing fares. Right. So, um, but guys, let me know what you think about the Kirk Cousins situation. Do you think Kirk Cousins is going to be here to start training camp? It's going to be it's an interesting question, especially if you're looking how the teams around the league it look like they solidified their quarterback spots with bridge quarterbacks, if not long term quarterbacks. So we'll just have to see how this thing shakes out. But right now, I feel like Kirk Cousins is going to be here for a while and it's going to prolong. Does not eliminate Cleveland from signing him anyway and making a trade, but it does look more and more like they're lining up to go get a rookie quarterback, maybe later on in the draft, or not at the second round, not at number 2 overall pick. So that's where we're at. All right, let's get into some of the guys that the Atlanta Falcons had today on the pro day for the Atlanta Falcons. So the Atlanta Falcons hosted a local pro day, and when you host a local pro day, these guys that's in the area, um, locally, and it's not part of your 30 visits. So, you know, you don't have to worry about, just having the 30 visits. This right here where you can invite a lot of people to showcase their talent. Falcons get a first-hand look at these guys, be able to conversation with these guys. Matter of fact, one of our players from last year, Notre Dame, our linebacker, actually was at the Atlanta Falcons Pro Day. They brought in 56 guys last year, and they actually took, our linebacker from Notre Dame. So that's one of the things to think about when you're looking at this, because this is like the last time they actually get to look at these guys face to face, and one of these guys might be a later round pick, or they could be in the first round because some notable guys showed up today as well. Malachi Starks, Jalen Walker showed up. So some guys could be on the number 15 pick for Atlanta Falcons because both of those guys more than likely going in the first round. So those guys showed up. It didn't show that Michael Williams, he was not there. They also looked at the 15 13 other um, Georgia Bulldogs as well. So they had 15 total Georgia Bulldogs as well. The center, one of the guys I actually mocked to the Atlanta Falcons on one of my latest drafts was Arian Smith, a guy that's will take the top off for any team, but he has problems catching the rock, so he's gonna drop down draft board because of that. Because any receiver that hands the suspect is gonna drop. So, but the Atlanta Falcons brought in um 35 offensive players, 45 defensive players, and 8 specialists. So they really had an opportunity to look at a lot of guys today, and you have to tip your head off because some of these guys, like I mentioned earlier, diamonds in the rough, right? Like I said, they brought in quarterbacks. We just talked about having backup quarterbacks, right? So they're not going to pick up quarterback in the first round. I kind of probably can guarantee that this year. Um, but they're looking at wide receivers. They're looking at running backs. You know, just so many guys that you can look at and kind of get an idea. You know, who they could particularly like, right? A lot of these guys, it wasn't guys for needs and things like that, but it's just guys locally who wanted to show their talent, guys that could potentially be on the 16-man practice squad as well. So this is really good for the Atlanta Falcons bring in. But so many guys they brought in. Trevor Etienne, another notable name. If you look at from the running back position. We talked about Seth McLaughlin on one of the 30 visits. He's actually local. He's from Buford, Georgia. Played at Ohio State. That's an offensive center for the Atlanta Falcons. Like I said, a lot of wide receivers that they brought in as well. But I think the biggest thing we're really thinking about and concerned about is the defensive players that they brought in, and it was a lot of notable of those guys as well. Locally here, and a lot of people say Georgia don't have, athletes. I beg to differ. Right? You look at this list here, and you like what you've seen. Just coming in, coming in.
Hey, y'all, guess what?
I'm doing a podcast.
Why's she gonna leave? All right.
Yes. Sorry about that, guys. People calling me doing the podcast. But if you look at the guys like Nazir Stackhouse, I really like his game. He could be a late pick for the Atlanta Falcons. Like I said, Malachi Starks. You look at Jalen Walker. This is where you start to get more and more of that depth that I talked about earlier. This is where you start to find these guys and could really be contributors for Atlanta Falcons. Special teams, which we never really talk about a lot. But this is what I like about Atlanta Falcons bringing in these guys from Pro Day. This is huge. I like that they went from 56 last year to 88 this year, which means it's more talent that's out there for the Atlanta Falcons to look at. And guys, be comfortable playing in their hometown. 45 defensive players, 35 offensive players, and 8 specialists, right? That's what you like to see from the Atlanta Falcons. So, guys, I'm really, curious to see what you guys think about that. Think about all the guys that's actually potentially that Atlanta Falcons can bring in. If you want to go out and look at the list yourself, just go out to the Atlanta Falcons.com homepage. You can actually see the list, and you can look at some of those guys and see potentially who the Atlanta Falcons could be targeting. Like I said, it wasn't a pro day for bringing in specific needs and things like this. It was just giving guys from this local area opportunity to put some some of their stuff on tape in front of coaches and show what they're able to do, and potentially could make their way on a 90-man roster, like I said, and potentially could be on a 16-man practice squad. So that's what you want to see from this Atlanta Falcons team. One thing I know about, if you look at most of the mock drafts, just like pretty much the last 4 seasons, most people are mocking a defensive player to the Atlanta Falcons at number 15. One guy in particular is Mike Green, and I'm starting to warm up to that a whole lot. I actually like the idea of the Atlanta Falcons actually, pulling Mark Green, calling his name, and let him be called, to be Atlanta Falcon. But more and more I think about it, I don't know if he's going to be there at number 15. I mean, this guy led, FPS and sacks last year. Yes, it's 1 year of really dominance, and he also played in a lower class level, but your production is your production. And this is one of the things I've been saying, been beating the drum on so long. Your production is your production, right? And then he stepped up a couple of games, right? Stepped up Ohio State, Virginia Tech, and he actually had really good games in both of those games as well. But he dominated where he was, right? And what's crazy about this whole NFL draft thing is, most coaches say, you listen to them in their their press conferences and things like that, they always talk about it's all about the tape, right? It's all about the tape. It's all about the tape. But I'm starting to believe from scouts and GMs, advantage that it's not about the tape. And a lot of times, it's more about the ceiling, about um, their athletic ability and things like that, and they kind of negate what the tape shows, right? And that's why so many teams mess up in the drafts. I'm just being honest about it. That's how why so many teams mess up in the draft, because if it was about the tape, right, you would see things go different. I hate to keep picking on Anthony Richardson, but the tape said what kind of quarterback he was, right? But if you listen to the scouts and the GMs, they really just went off his athletic ability, and now he's in competition with Daniel Jones, another guy that was at Duke, and like I said, the tape does not lie, right? So I just I think it's important that when these teams start to get it right, that's why you have to look at other teams like what the Los Angeles Rams was able to do, right? They did away with first round picks for so many years, and they was able to look at film and get guys in, and you see the production some of these guys have made um, in later rounds because they looked at the tape, right? It's not always about the athletic ability and things like that. The tape tells a lot, and that's why we look at a guy like Mike Green, right? I know people saying he played in the didn't play in the Power Five and things like that, but when you watched him play where he did play, he was really dominant. And that's what you got to go off of, right? Look at a guy like Shadur Sanders played at Jackson State. When he played at Jackson State, he was dominant at Jackson State. It was dominant, right? So, yes, he played at a lower level, but he was dominant. That's what you're supposed to do if you're a good player. So I like, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, those guys, tape and their athletic ability matches up, right? But in sometimes um, it doesn't, right? Your athletic ability might not match up what the tape says, but the tape shows how you dominated teams year in and year out, and that's what they should go off, right? That I just really believe that, and that's why I believe, you know, a lot of times NFL teams get positions wrong when they draft quarterbacking, especially, right? We know that. Go back and look over the years of how many quarterbacks that was drafted early. If you look at just the draft class that Justin Fields was in, it's only one player from that whole draft is still on his team, and that's Trevor Lawrence, right? All those quarterbacks that went in that draft, it's only one player from that draft, one quarterback is still on his on this team that he got drafted by. And what that tells you? All those guys win top 10 almost, right? And none of those guys are still with their team. So it lets you know that they got it wrong, and a lot of them went off physical traits and things like that. Um, Sometimes they go off tape, but you got to have some circumstances where you look at a guy like Matt Jones, right? He was really successful, but what did Matt Jones have around him, right? He had a whole bunch of 5 stars. See what I'm saying? So they get paid a lot of money, man. I know it's a science to it, it's a process to it, and sometimes it's a crapshoot to it as well because you think a guy's going to pan out, but you never know. But a guy like Mike Green, in my opinion, can definitely. I like the tape. I like what he bring to the table, and I think his testing, kind of matches up what he did on tape. So, he's falling that category with like a Dual Carter and a Travis Hunter, a guy that looks really good on tape, and his athletic ability matches that, right? So, that's what I like. You look at a guy like Shamar Stewart, right, who tested in the 99 percentile of the NFL Combine and his testing, right? This guy only had 4.5 sacks over 3 seasons, right? But he tested, you know, out the yin yang. So the thing about a guy like Shamar Stewart, when you're thinking about it, is do you decide to go off what you think his ceiling can be because he's so athletic, and one of these coaches say, "I can get the best out of him." Right? That's one of the, the, the gambles that I was talking about. You taking chances because you like what you his potential could be because he's so athletic, right? Um, but when you go pull on the tape, right, this guy production is not there. It's just not there. So I know a lot of Falcons fans probably would be upset if we take a guy like Shamar Stewart, and you would have to hope that our new defensive coordinator that we just brought, I mean defensive coordinator, defensive line coach that we just brought in, gonna be able to pull the best out of him and get that 99.9 percentile of athletic ability to actually turn it into to production. And that's what I'm talking about when you look at things like that. So, it's other guys. I love Malachi Starks. His tape is really well, and that's what I look at, guys. Like I say, I'm not a scout, so I don't really care about measurables and things like that. I look at what you was able to do on the football field. I think that's the most important. But a guy like Malachi Starks um, is another guy I really like a lot. If they was to pick him at 15, I would not be upset. I know we need a pass rusher, but you know, great good players on your team at any position. Um, I'm not upset about that. And when you look at the big board, the Atlanta Falcons board, if he's the top guy on the board, that's why they pull him off. So that's what I think. Michael Williams, of course, James Pierce Jr. Is another guy. Um, and then you start to get in the later rounds are guys that could potentially, the Atlanta Falcons could look and see what they're able to do. So um, I know for a fact that the Atlanta Falcons should. When I say for a fact, they should take a defensive player. Even the owner himself, Mr. Arthur Blank, said that everybody knows that we're focusing on defense. So don't fall for the smoke screens or looking at offensive tackles because they did bring in Banks from Texas, right? And they had a private workout with him. Um, but I think this is the time. This is the year where Atlanta Falcons are not out to fool people and go offense this time. I think this time they're going to actually go after a defensive player simply because around 15, some of the best players in this draft is going to be defensive players. So I really believe that. But I want to hear from you guys. Let me know who you think the Atlanta Falcons is really going to take at number 15. Like I said, we've seen Mike Green drafted to us. We've seen Jahad Campbell, another guy out of Alabama, the linebacker, right? We've seen Shamar Stewart actually marked to us, and we've seen Michael Williams marked to us as well. Those are just some of the national media where some of these guys have been marked to the Atlanta Falcons. Jalen Walker is another guy, but a lot of people believe like Jalen Walker might not be there at 15 as well. But if he's there, he's another guy that the Atlanta Falcons could potentially bring in as well. I mean, a guy that and because of what his ability to actually use him in different ways, could be an inside linebacker and could be a pass rusher as well. If you look at the pro day, the Atlanta Falcons actually listed him as an edge, right? So they do see him, as an edge guy, coming out the corner, when I think about a guy like Jalen Walker, I just go watch all the Texas games that he played and how he wrecked those games, right? Him and Michael Williams, both of those guys had really good games against the University of Texas, and that's one of the better teams in the SEC. So, seems like when the competition, was raised, those guys played better. So I like both of those guys from Georgia. If you look at a guy like James Pierce Jr., right? This guy, if he would have came out last year, he was, rated one of the best pass rushers in the country coming out last year. This year, he had a down year. So you don't know, consistency there. But I still think he has potential. He actually tested well as well. So the tape matches up with his game. Just the production was not as good as it was in the previous year with him. Um, Malachi Starks is a guy that I talked about. I've been raving about as well. And if you look at what they asked Malachi Starks to do this year, instead of playing a lot of safety, he was playing a lot of nickel, right? So kind of put him in a different role where you know kind of stock kind of went down. He was a second team all all college this year, but at the same time, he wasn't a liability either. So I think if you put him more at the safety, bringing that big nickel that I would like to see with a guy like Malachi Starr, I think it'll work. Will Johnson is another guy that could go in the first round as well. Cornerback out of Michigan. He had a down year. He didn't play a lot of games with the Wolverines this year because of his injuries. So um, we don't know where direction the NFL can go in, but I do believe because they're picking in the middle of the draft, they're going to get a good player, right? Nobody could be upset with who they pick, right? Um, all those guys could be on the board. If all those guys on the board at number 15, I think right now I'm probably going to go with Mike Green because I just like what he was able to do this year. Um, and then maybe Jalen Walker next. Um, Michael Williams, Malachi Starks, Will Johnson, and then James Pierce Jr. That's what I would roll with. Let's see here what T. Terry has to say. Did you know Mike Green played the Senior Bowl in that pancake move offensive line? Man, he dominated the Senior Bowl, and everybody know the viral one where he ran over the old guy in the Senior Bowl. Go back and look who that was. That was one of the first round prospects at offensive lineman as well. So he had a great Senior Bowl. That's why you hear his name more and more because of what he was able to do against better competition when he went to the Senior Bowl, right? He does have skeletons in the closet. We all know that character maybe have some character issues, but nothing is it's not like he was actually convicted of anything. I'm pretty sure the Falcons did their due diligence on that. So if they do decide to take Mike Green, it's because they're comfortable with him. Terry Fontenot always talking about the makeup of the player. Um, Millie Mills said, "What's up, bro? I'm happy as hell that Kurt will be on the bench this season. Make him right away. If Michael Penix Jr. starts playing like trash, then Kurt gonna be useful." Yeah, man. Don't say he started playing like trash. And you know, you're right. You're all right. We do have a good solid backup. But what we want to see, and I mentioned this in my last live, right? What we want to see from Michael Penix Jr. is what we all hoping we see is that yes, he is the future of the Atlanta Falcons. He's the franchise quarterback, right? I know a lot of people thinking that we get right now at with 3 games, on his belt that he's that guy, but I'm there, but not quite because you gotta go out and prove it. He didn't win, but one of those games, um, it was not his fault, right? We do know that it was not his fault. It's more like some Matt Ryan years where the defense let us down, right? Put up points, but we couldn't stop anybody. So, but I really like what I seen out of Michael Penix, and if Michael Penix can stay healthy, that would be great. But if he does not stay healthy, you're right. We do have a backup quarterback ready to come in and deliver the goods, you know, and he can earn that paycheck. But he definitely is going to be somebody that going to be around the pine, man. It's going to be around the pine, even though it's not pine anymore. But guys, like I said, it's the 11th, the 24th, the the draft will be kickoff in Green Bay, and then we'll see how all this unfold. I definitely will be on live with somebody, enjoying and see what our Falcons do. Right, we're gonna lay it out and see what they do this year. See if anybody going to be shocked about the pick that they pick at 15 this year, or do the Falcons, you know, move back in the draft? So many things that they could potentially do. We just don't know. Texas said Mike Green pancakes play was like he that pancake he had in the pro day was just nasty, man. Like I said, go back and if you really want to see, him play some NFL talent, go look at the Ohio State game. I think he had a sack there, tackle for loss and things like that. Go look at the Virginia Tech game. Those are the Power Five teams he played, and then the other teams he played, he dominated. And that's what you expect from a guy that you're thinking potentially can go, um, in the first round. You look at a guy, and guy that there are comps out there for somebody like a Mike Green, and one in particular is Khalil Mack. He came from a lower level school as well. He was drafted in the top 5 or 6, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And look at his career. So just because you come from a lower school somewhere does not mean you can't be productive. And Mike Green has shown that. So if we take Mike Green right now, that's my pick, and I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there, which means they probably won't take him, and he probably won't even make it. So we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. But right now, being at number 15, I think it will be a good player on the board, and that we all could be satisfied with that the Atlanta Falcons should take. So that's the way I look at it. I hope you guys look at it the same way. But guys, 51 minutes been talking. We talked about the return of Kevin King and what that does, adding the depth to Atlanta Falcons secondary. We talked about Kirk Cousins and how the Cleveland Browns signing Joe Flacco may affect him, and he could potentially be here to stay with our team. And then we talked about the Atlanta Falcon local pro day, where they're brought in 88 guys to look at, to showcase their talents and have the opportunity to actually maybe get drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, be undrafted free agents to be part of the 90-man roster and potentially be on the 16-man practice squad. So, like I said, if you want to go look at the names, please go out on AtlantaFalcons.com, look at, the news and see where their names that they brought in, and let me know some of those guys you think that could potentially be a contributor to the Atlanta Falcons here in 2025. That's all I have. Thank you guys for tuning in on this Friday. Fan Talk Day. Kirk Cousins might be here to stay, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But there you have it, guys. This is your boy Ricondo coming back at you with another video. Peace.